everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Today we are getting into my long-awaited rune series. So if you have seen the previous video I made where I mentioned that I was going to be starting a rune series, this is the first video in that series. I'm going to be talking about 4 runes today in this video, breaking each of those down for you, explaining the meanings behind them, and sharing a little bit of extra information. The whole idea behind this series is to sort of learn the runes alongside you. I have been studying them for a little while now and wanting to go a little deeper, wanting to really understand them and really get to a point where I feel comfortable reading with runes for people. So I thought this series would not only be informational and helpful for those of you that are wanting to learn the runes, it would be great for me to sort of get to learn alongside all of you as I create these videos for you. So if you're interested in learning about some runes today, keep watching and let's get into it. Okay, so starting things off with the rune Fehu. I just want to say really quick before I get into this rune, just because you will see this right out the gate with this rune, we're talking about a different time frame where what was seen as certain things was very different than it is in the modern world. What I mean by that is with the rune Fehu, the traditional meaning is cattle and livestock, which links to wealth and abundance. And you may not immediately have that connection. You could certainly eventually make that connection, but it may take a moment because in the modern world, that's not necessarily the first thing you think of when you think of wealth and abundance, but there was a time when it was. So the rune Fehu means gain in terms of riches and possessions, feelings of plenty, luck in general. But with this rune, there is also warnings against excess of materialism and to be careful to not get possessed by possessions. So you don't want possessions or things or the material world to grab hold of you to the point where you lose yourself to an excess. Another thing I wanted to mention about this rune that I read about in my Nordic Runes book is there is an earth and cow goddess named Nerthus. And there's some imagery of her that comes up with this rune and how she pours fruits from her horn of plenty upon you. Now, again, she's a cow goddess, and we're talking about cattle and livestock being the core meaning of this rune. So think of that as a feeling of abundance, being showered with abundance when she's pouring from her horn of plenty upon you. And of course, there is symbolism of gold, coins, and money with this rune, since we're obviously talking about wealth. So that is the rune Fehu. Now we are talking about the rune Uruz, with a traditional meaning of wild ox. Now with the rune of Uruz, we're talking about challenge, an archetypal trial or rite of initiation. This is facing a challenge that will test your strength, and it's a challenge that is necessary for personal growth. So it's not just challenge being thrown at you for no reason. There is a deep intent and meaning behind this trial, this challenge that you are going through. It's in order for you to grow and get better, and it is necessary for you. Something that I wrote down that I read in my book Nordic Runes that I wanted to share, a little quote here, was a fearsome symbol of all you must overcome on the path to mastery. So there is something fearsome about this rune, but it's symbolizing the work ahead of you, the work you must do within, the things you must accomplish to master yourself in whatever it is you are working towards. And the thing with this rune is that it's an initiation into a higher state through that challenge. So as you accomplish that, you're reaching a higher state of being. And with that, something that is stressed in the book is that you're not going at this alone. Your ancestors are with you. So perhaps there's almost an element of you having to endure something that perhaps your ancestors have gone through in some capacity. Now you have the wisdom of them behind you and standing beside you in spirit, assisting you as you take on this challenge, whatever it may be. With the challenge that this rune brings, there's also something to gain. There's strength, valor, and courage in facing this. Whatever it is you must face, you will gain all of that along with that initiation into a higher state. So regardless of what it is you're facing at this time, just know that there's a bigger meaning and a greater purpose behind why you are going through this. You're not just being thrown challenge and difficulty for no good reason. And perhaps knowing that going into it gives you a little bit more strength and endurance to stick it out, because you go into it knowing, no, this is worth it. But perhaps depending on what it is, you are already aware that it is going to be worth it. but this rune is just affirming that for you. And that is Uruz. And now we go into the rune Thurisaz. So this is what this rune looks like. And the traditional meaning here is giant. Now, if we think about giants, this will make sense when I explain the meaning. So you may be like, why does this rune mean giant? What does that mean? So when we take this a step further, we're talking about threat or disruption, misfortune or unpredictable events causing pain, a threat to establish order, great difficulties, and powerful opposition, even sometimes feelings of truly being tormented by whatever it is that's going on. Now, if we think about Norse myth, we hear about giants. I've certainly heard of giants, specifically frost giants. That's what I had heard of going into all of this. Now, another way they were known is rhyme Thurisaz, which is interesting because if you think about it, Thurisaz sounds similar to Thurisaz. So that was another way they were known. And in Norse myth, we hear about these rhyme Thurisaz or frost giants. And they existed before man or the gods, and they now dwell in Jotunheim, but occasionally do re-emerge to cause upset, wreak havoc, and they represent forces of chaos that disrupt order. Thurisaz represents an energy of chaos and difficulty, much like what the giants can bring. So when you know that about the giants and you know the meaning of Thurisaz, it all kind of just ties together quite easily and simply, in my opinion. So just knowing what the giants were seen as in Norse myth, and then knowing that Thurisaz is linked to giants, makes you completely understand that feeling of chaos and disruption that this rune can bring. There's also an old English poem that was mentioned in my Nordic rune book that describes this rune as a thorn. And if you actually look at the rune, it does kind of look like a thorn if we're looking at this as if it's a rose stem and this is the thorn sticking out on it. I guess you could see that symbolically. What's interesting about it is that thorns could be seen as something that holds a similar meaning. Thorns have always symbolically been used to kind of symbolize some sort of disruption to a situation or just making things a little more difficult to process or get through. So that is the rune of Thurisaz. Moving along to the last rune we are talking about today, which is Ansuz, with the meaning of breath. Really quickly, I want to mention, looking at this rune, it does look quite similar to Fehu if you're just starting out trying to memorize the runes, what they look like. Let me show you what I mean. Here's Fehu, this is Ansuz. It's just the two lines pointing down rather than upwards. They are quite similar though, and you will see these types of similarities throughout the runes. Some of them do look similar to one another. It's just something to keep in mind as you're trying to memorize the runes and what they look like. You want to make sure you get it right in your readings. So as I mentioned, Ansuz means breath. With this rune, we're talking about the sacred spoken word. So that links to things like spells, chants, prayers, breath, writing, and communication. There is an energy of needing to be alert and well-informed and to be ready to move deeper into mysteries in order to enlighten and empower. Another way we can think about this rune is just purely how we express ourselves, because there is such a close link to communication with this card. It's also that expression of the self. And this rune can also signify having sources of wisdom and inspiration around you, and you are able to find things around you that inspire you to communicate whatever it is you are trying to say. So perhaps this rune coming up can signify that you are in a place of comfort to truly express yourself or say whatever it is you want to say. Put yourself out there in whatever way you're wanting to put yourself out there, if that makes any sense. Now, the rune Ansuz is closely linked to the god Odin, and if you really think about it, this does kind of make sense because Odin was known for his sacrifice to gain the wisdom of the runes. Now, the runes are a form of communication. They are closely linked to these ideas of the spoken word, communication, expressing the self, prayers, chants, spells, all of those things can be linked to the runes. And so the importance of the sacrifices made by Odin to gain the wisdom of the runes would make sense that it would closely link him to Ansuz. So that is the rune of Ansuz. And just because I mentioned it a few times, I did want to show this book in this video for those of you who didn't see my previous video where I mentioned I was going to be starting this series, where I showed all of the tools and what I've been using to study and learn the runes. This book was one of the things I mentioned. It is the main source I have been using to study. I've also researched online and things like that, but this has been kind of integral to my study of the runes, so I wanted to share it in case any of you are interested and wanted to pick it up. These are just my flashcards I have in here as I go along and make all of my notes to share with you guys for these videos. Okay, you guys, so that concludes my first video in my rune series, talking about the first 4 runes of the Elder Futhark. I hope you found the information in this video to be helpful. If you have any questions at all, feel free to post those in the comments section below. And if you're interested in learning about the other runes in the Elder Futhark, make sure to subscribe to my channel and hit the notification bell so you are notified when these videos are released. Thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, take care and be well. Bye, guys.